Welcome to Virtual Society. I'm your host, Itamar Dvir, and today we're diving into all things community with Brian, the head of community for Mantle Network. He shared his journey from BitDAO to Mantle, his insights on community dynamics, and effective engagement strategies. We have also explored the future of Web3 communities and communities in general, and dove deep into some valuable advice for aspiring community builders. I really hope you would love this conversation as much as I did, as it is packed with valuable insights. So, even though you are one of many faces Mantle have, you still prefer to remain somewhat Anon. May I ask, why is that?
Yeah, so I think really it's sort of two parts: privacy and security. Another part is just experimentation and curiosity. And then maybe a final part that I've just realized after being anonymous for so long is that there's a personal brand element. So like getting into this space, initially it just had privacy concerns, was aware that, some blockchains are public, and I just wasn't sure what that meant for me. Like how having a, sort of public identity tied to on-chain transactions would impact me in the future. So I just sort of took this anonymous route and then stuck with it as an experiment for quite some time. Was fully anonymous for probably a year and a half, 2 years. There's people who know me by my face. I've been to events, and I'm not hiding in that sense. It's just online. I've kind of got this anonymous sort of brand at this point. And I think people identify me a lot by my profile picture. I think it stands out quite a bit, and meeting people in person has been an interesting experiment too. Like, oh, you're lBrian, like the guy behind the scary face profile picture. So yeah, I'd say security, privacy, and partially this personal experiment and anonymity.
And you actually mentioned that the anonymity kind of added to your personal brand. How, like in what way?
Yeah, I think the main way is like when I do see people in person, they have this sense that they're sort of getting a peek behind the curtain, and it adds some weight to that meeting. But also just the fact that I have this profile picture, which is recognized by the community that I've been in for a number of years now.
Nice, perfect. So you're serving now as the head of community at Mantle Network. Can you kind of provide us with a short overview of your role and what it means?
Yeah, for sure. So, head of community, I think, like, as you said earlier, there's many faces of the Mantle community, and I think that's an important piece for me. Like, I'm not overseeing every community activation. We have a large team that's running, from DevRel to our BD team, who's running a lot of activations on the ground as well. So a lot of it is, general community management, wearing a lot of different hats, community operations, making sure that our campaigns and such can run smoothly from an operations standpoint, providing ecosystem support to our growing ecosystem of dApps and teams building, user support, setting up those processes, and building a team that can facilitate, some of the best quality support you can receive for an L2. Also, driving a lot of product feedback, hosting campaigns, programs, and events. That probably covers, like in a quick bullet point list, the things I do on a day-to-day basis.
Nice. So how would you say define the concepts of community within the context of like the Web3 space? Do you see it as a marketing tactic? Do you see it as just part of the game or part of the Web3 philosophy? Or like what's your kind of view on it?
I think it's all of those things, and I think it's changing all the time. The thing, I think the main thing is that the definition, whether you're in Web3 or Web2, the definition for community that I like, and that's super simple, is just that, community is a place where people can interact with each other versus an audience where you're sort of talking to folks. So this works in Web2. There's a lot of like paid communities in Web2 that people sort of pay to be in these communities to interact with each other. I think Web3 has a much more open ethos, and part of it is about building transparency. So, there's there's some paid communities like NFT communities and such, but a lot of the community ethos in Web3 is just wide open. And it's about getting in front of the team, getting the team in front of users and in front of builders to build that reputation on their own. And I think that ties in, of course, to marketing, building this sort of brand reputation and this trust in the space, which I think especially if you're just onboarding, can be a bit hard to trust. So, yeah.
So that's interesting. Like, obviously, with everyone launching their community pretty much simultaneously during the building phase, it kind of opens you up to a lot of criticism, a lot of feedback, a lot of sometimes backlash from community members who want to see more, who want to see it faster, who want to see this, that, and the other. And it's sometimes difficult to share all of the context with the community. So with your experience in Mantle, how did you guys kind of navigate it?
Yeah. Yes. So, I mean, especially early days testnet, right? Everybody's interested, like when airdrop, and that's when you get the most,
the win period.
Yeah, the big win period for sure. I mean, it's just a matter of priority and like what's feasible. So, like for us, the primary thing in the early days is just getting the network running, getting it into testnet phase, and supporting our builders to get started building on testnet, so we can have an active ecosystem when we hit mainnet. So a lot of that is work behind the scenes, and a lot of that requires developers just grinding heads down, and some of those timelines shift day to day. So yeah, you're right, we can't provide context on all of these things typically on the time frame that users want. So what we try to do is in those times of waiting is set up things for people to do, ways for people to engage, things for people to get excited about that maybe aren't tied exactly to like the network development, but instead to like getting a way to engage, with other community members to build some excitement for what's coming up, whatever that may be. And also, of course, taking that feedback and funneling it to the team to prioritize product development.
Nice. Perfect. So what were some of the earliest experiences that pulled you into the community space? So what was your first interaction in a community, IRL or online? Like, what's your journey there?
Yeah. So a large community I was in when I was a lot younger in high school and, through my early 20s was the Tumblr community. So I don't know if you're familiar, but it's basically online art forum, mostly based on like photos, videos, GIFs, a lot of like famous memes I think originated on Tumblr. So it's like a quick way to share like visual mediums. And the value became super clear to me really early when I became involved in those communities. You could join there, you could start collaborating with people immediately by posting your work. You could like share and kind of like put yourself out there to be criticized as well. You can also, network with folks to find work, which I ended up doing through just being involved on Tumblr, and of course, like making friends. So, I made a lot of really early connections with people who I had long-term friendships with and still have friendships with to this day, just by posting photos as a photographer, posting art as an artist, and getting in contact with those people through a forum.
Nice. Did you like in Game 7? We have a bias, I would say, towards community members. Like we have a lot of core team members who started as community members, and we're trying to empower community members to do more, pretty much take more responsibility, and we will empower them either by giving them more resources or giving them more access in order to facilitate some sort of initiative. And with you kind of having the experience of pretty much getting a job out of being active on Tumblr, did you take some of that approach and implemented it into Mantle as well?
I think so. I mean, that it defines my journey into this space as well. Like I started contributing and just trying to add value essentially to the work that other people were doing in Web3. And that's how I onboarded into this space and got work in this space as well. Yeah, and I feel the same way. I want to prioritize community to the best of my ability. We try to hire from a community, especially. Um, yeah, it's a bit tricky too because there's a lot of people in Web3 who are curious, and there's a lot of ways to contribute. Um, but but finding the right person for like a specific role is a little bit harder than sort of just
For sure.
selecting somebody from your community who's active.
Yeah, I think that it's funny because I would say in the last few months, really, we're trying to take a somewhat different approach and think about stuff that the community possibly needs with the person already in mind, if that makes sense. Like when we get to know some of our community members to a better degree and understand what they're good at, and sometimes there is a correlation with stuff that we actually need, and then if we can make the match and pretty much bring the idea out of us, hey guys, this is what we need, we really think that you ex community member would be perfect for this, what do you think? That's where we saw, I would say, our most successful initiatives, with a very painful start of presenting an idea, trying to find someone in the community that will actually like take the leadership and take the reins and execute it without, I would say, the success we wanted, and now we're slightly shifting into just finding those opportunities, which is interesting. And
Yeah, I mean,
really well.
yeah, I think that just speaks to the fact that community is really a long game. Like
100%.
you really have to be here to build for the long term. And I see Game 7 doing that with the way you guys have rolled out your community. It was very, very structured. This sort of private space that gradually opened up in this product suite that's now just being revealed within the last few months, really. So yeah, I think the other piece there too that I like to lean into is like, if we aren't attracting the people who we want to see contributing, or people who have the skill set that we want to see contributing, maybe there's something that we're not providing. There's some value that we're not providing, and we need to take a closer look at that on our end.
Loved it. And I'm seeing you guys doing like a really good job there, and we are taking inspiration from you guys for sure. So how did you kind of shape your understanding of community dynamics? Was it by researching? Was it by reading books? Like any specific recommendations? If you would drop some, that would be really great for the audience. But was it just like personal experience or other educational stuff?
Yeah, I think first personal experience, just taking sort of that intuitive approach early on. But then, especially like early in my journey, DAOs were an important piece, and like trying to understand all the aspects of governance and how that factors into community. That became really important. So it's like, how do people actually interact in like specific governance models? A lot of that stuff is in the weeds, and I don't have any strong suggestions there, aside from maybe this book called I think it's called Impact Networks, which is
interesting.
Yeah, it's a really good one. Actually, there was a lot of talk about it, I think, maybe 2 years ago, even in the crypto space. So that's a good one. Also, the CMX community they're primarily focused on like Web2 communities, but they've got a great podcast. There's another podcast called In Before the Lock, which was really helpful. And then there's a designer community called Future, run by this guy Chris Do, which is pretty interesting to dive into. They focus a lot on paid communities, but they run strong like Web2 communities for creators. Some like high-powered folks who push out like quality work. So it's interesting to learn from them as well.
Nice. There's a lot here that I didn't know, so that's great for me as well. Could you kind of share with us some specific moments or like experiences that you feel like led you to explore just Web3 technologies? Like, how did you get from Tumblr into the Mantle Discord? Like, what was the journey there?
Right. Um, yeah, it's a long journey. It's a long journey. It's and like, to be honest, my career path has been sort of all over the place, and I've always enjoyed like exploring on new opportunities, but I'm just curious too to learn different things. So one of the ways that I dove into Web3 was just I was exploring at regenerative agriculture at the time. So basically, farmers who take care of these are real life farmers for the degens out there, people who are touching dirt, not grass. But it was finding a way, for basically looking into ways that these real life farmers who were committed to these sustainable community first practices in farming, finding ways to get them funding. So to me, this was an important thing that I think the world should have, is just, sustainable communities focused around food and sustainable land practices. But the farmers had trouble sort of getting this funding, at least in the US, from the research I did. So that sort of sent me into crypto through some side rabbit hole, looking at these DAO-led approaches to governing resources. And so like asking this question, what would it mean to sort of maybe take something like a co-op model and as a pathway to get farmers, ownership of land that they could sustain for generations. So yeah, really, really roundabout way of getting here.
I feel like that's something that a lot of like heads of community managers share. I would say that interest in like almost everything, just in people, like pretty much the template, not necessarily template, but I think some of the things that I'm now saying, because I'm interviewing like mostly community experts now, and it seems like that want to understand what someone is doing and kind of diving deeper into that and not just staying in the surface level is someone that a lot of community guys and girls have in common, which is interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I spent a lot of time growing up listening to like Freakonomics radio too. I don't know if you listen to that, but like these behavioral economics podcasts, just like, why are people doing weird things as consumers or as like citizens? Or yeah.
Nice. Okay, so let me go into like the BitDAO mental network like situation. So first and foremost, just for context, what is the relationship between BitDAO and Mantle? Because you started as a BitDAO contributor and now you're the head of community for Mantle.
Yeah, so BitDAO went through a rebrand and it's now Mantle. So there's no more BitDAO. There is a Bit token, but it's basically you can migrate it, and the utility of that token is dwindling, and will soon be, mostly you're just going to want to have MNT to be involved in this ecosystem. NFA, DYOR as always. But that path was just me contributing in the community, finding ways that I could add value. Just in the Discord, asking questions, learning, forming working groups, and trying to coordinate with other people, and find ways again to just add value. From there, I was brought onto the team. At that time, I was interested in transitioning careers, so I was looking around, and the folks over at Wind Ranger hired me, and I started working as a community manager there. From there, it was just a slow sort of ramping up of interest and leading like stronger efforts for community at Mantle once we did this sort of rebrand. So there were a number of governance proposals that initiated that transition for BitDAO to Mantle. And through that process of like seeing this new thing being built, I just got really excited about what that could mean, starting from scratch, building a community for an ecosystem too. And just, again, just started sort of escalating as I had as an independent contributor, the ways that I was trying to add value. Yeah, does that answer the question? I sort of
Yeah,
lost
I
track
think so.
there.
Like it was a very general one, was it? Just explain the
Nice.
general, which I think you hit exactly where I
One
wanted it. So
one
during that,
other Oh, sorry.
yeah, go for it.
One other thing I just wanted to circle back on too, a question maybe for you too about this
Yeah.
journey into this space is like, I think one way that people get involved too is like aping into coins with each other, right?
For sure.
So you have a friend group, or even if you don't have a friend group, you maybe establish one after you get interested in this space. I'm just curious, was that part of your journey as well? It was like just this shared like strategizing around like what is all of this stuff and like why should we buy into this?
For me, like it very much started like I would say the Web3 and the blockchain journey kind of started the same for me as everyone else, kind of dabbling in ETH and BTC and trying to understand what I'm doing. But the part where I made kind of a career out of it and I understood kind of the impact was actually solar. It's like a fantasy sports. Now it's fantasy sports. It was fantasy football, European football, soccer, however you want to call it. That's where kind of everything clicked for me, because my first community was a fantasy sports community. Like I've built the biggest fantasy sports community in Israel. That was my thing. And when I saw how Web3 is integrated into that and play the game, that's where I was like, oh, okay, like there's something here that I really, really, really like. And I think that's kind of where I got, let's say, red pill, because you see one use case that, for me at least, I saw one use case that I really liked, and then I fell in love with the philosophy, and I fell in love with the people, and I fell in love with kind of the mission, and got educated by building, by being involved. And it's interesting because I feel like a lot of people are kind of are finding their first community and first like use case of something that they feel strongly about, and then that turns into like a huge rabbit hole that just swallows you up.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I think, I mean, it's pretty much the same journey on my end. It's just that you're in the fantasy sports area, and I was more interested in
Yeah.
DAOs as this organizing element. And yeah, I think a lot of community folks have the same onboarding journey as both of us, right? Like you said, just
100%.
escalating your involvement. And I think DAOs were a big part of that 2 or 3 years ago. They were sort of this marketing effort to get Web2 folks involved. Like maybe you don't want to like risk your Web2 reputation, but we know you're super interested in Web3. So why don't you just start contributing, right? Why don't you just like start adding value, and we'll give you something back that's equally valuable or more valuable. Yeah.
Yes, sure. So I want to kind of dive a bit deeper into some strategic slash tactical conversation regarding like community. So from your experience, what are some of the most effective strategies that you have used in order to engage users within the Mantle network community that actually like worked?
Right. So I'll again just start by saying I'm one of many. Our team is large, and there's a lot of larger campaigns which are not just spearheaded by me, but supported and led by other folks on our team. And one of the most important was our Mantle Journey campaign, which is essentially a way to, it was an early points program. Our points were called miles, and you would earn miles by engaging on chain. And at the end of the season, you would get a share of essentially an airdrop. These campaigns, which we're seeing all over the place right now with points, I think are actually a good way to do that. They need to be, I think we're still working as a space to make them more sustainable. I saw a tweet the other day. It was like, points program, but it doesn't end. And, there's a lot of companies out there already doing this sort of thing. So those are a great way. The other thing is just by setting a regular cadence for events. If you know that you're going to meet weekly to explore an ecosystem project like we do with our Mantle deep dives or with our town halls now, then you've got a reliable place to show up and see the same folks, and a reliable place to show up and also contribute to the culture, whether that's by, you want to showcase something of yourself there that you created, or you want to, drop a meme or something like that. All these things add up, I think, to creating a more engaged community. So setting a regular cadence and defining like broader programs that can first drive the activity you want, but also like get people interested in what you're building. So with Journey, the main thing is like, how do we get folks exploring the ecosystem, this amazing ecosystem that's being built, and all these projects that are popping up that have their communities of their own. And I think those bigger programs can be really helpful.
Right. So that's Miles' system. That was pretty much, correct me if I'm wrong by saying it, but that was, let's say, a gamified, let's say, structure in order to engage people with the network in different ways that they wouldn't necessarily just go about and do, but since it is now gamified and it has a reward attached to it and it's just simply more fun, to be honest, we saw, or you guys saw, more people engaging with it, and ever since then, maybe even a bit before that, we are seeing it as pretty much a common practice in the industry. Am I correct in framing it that way?
Yeah, for sure. I think the gamification is the important piece there. But also, in the L2 space, like it's a crowded space, and there's a lot of places that people, our community and other communities, that they want to put their attention and they want to put their time. And so it's a matter of like, again, providing value. So when we say come to explore our ecosystem, that's not too compelling of an ask. But if we say come explore our ecosystem and we're going to bring you through this gamified journey where you can earn some additional rewards, and those rewards can give you additional benefits like governance in our ecosystem, or more sort of firepower for creating on-chain transactions in the form of MNT, right, which is our gas fee token. So, it's an onboarding tool for the ecosystem, but it's also an onboarding tool for our broader community, our broader community contribution efforts, like governance, right? Mm-hmm. How do we get the asset into the hands of these folks who are just joining our ecosystem?
Nice. Okay, so you mentioned events, and you mentioned recurring events, town halls, and deep dives. Are those like strictly educational, or are they somewhat, is it just educational, just entertainment, or a mix of both? And if it's a mix of both, like, is it an 80-20, 70-30?
Yeah, so with town halls, we're working that out quite a bit. We also have other events like our Showcase Radio and mm-hmm. Eco Waves events on Twitter. Those are the more traditional sort of AMA style, where members of our BD team in particular, and probably a handful of ecosystem projects are going off of an agenda and taking community questions. The deep dives, we host those. The deep dives at town halls right now, we host those on Discord, and the reason we do that is because it's a lot easier to engage with an audience on Discord. So deep dives are probably, in terms of that split between like how the community engages, I would say it's anywhere from like 50-50 to 80-20, somewhere in those ranges. There's obviously engagement throughout. We try to pull folks in if they have questions throughout the event, and that's a big part of it as well. Is like I'm not here to tell you like what this protocol does. And background on deep dives is we just invite an ecosystem project in to host an educational event, a workshop, or a demo, and then from there we take a lot of community questions. So for me, it's a learning experience too. So I'm informed by the questions that community members ask. So I'm constantly pulling folks in and trying to encourage them to get on stage. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nice. So how are you deciding what calls or what events are you conducting on Discord compared to what events you are running on Twitter or elsewhere? Like, is it more about, like, on Twitter, it's more about the awareness and it's more almost like a marketing thing, and you want more people to see it in order to capture more people so they will get introduced to Mantle and to the community and get into the funnel, or is it just like, what's kind of the decision making behind it?
Yeah, so I think you mostly got it right. Like Twitter is a much bigger arena, right? You can sort of discover a space that somebody's on if you see it on Twitter. If you hear about a Discord event on Twitter, you're probably not going to get involved unless you're already in that community. So our closed channels, or our like owned channels, I guess, is like Discord and Telegram. Those would be more for our core community. This is a place, Discord is a place where you can get more involved, essentially. And so the engagement element there, again, is really important. You can comment on Twitter Spaces, but it's
no one sees them. It's not a chat, so
yeah, it's not a chat, exactly. So, but they've got the broadcast as well, which we're going to be exploring because there is an engagement element there. Though it's not as deep and rich as Discord, right? Like there's a whole culture that you can build on Discord with all the customizations of memes and stickers and emojis. All that stuff adds up, and people can bring in, with an ecosystem, or even like Game 7, right, where you guys are supporting, all these games that are within your sort of community. People can bring their brand and their culture into your Discord during an event in the form of their branded stickers or their jokes, right, that they've built over time. It's a little bit harder to do that on Twitter. So yeah, awareness on Twitter, deeper engagement on Discord is sort of TLDR.
You got it. Okay, perfect. So in terms of, let's say, connections and forming deeper connections between community members, how do you facilitate maybe the opportunities, or how do you enable community members to form those deeper connections that we feel, or I feel, are like, I don't know, like it's like a super fuel to any community? Because if we have a bunch of people who started off as strangers and they are now friends because of the community, because they met in the community, it feels like it affects, and it kind of affects everyone. It has an AOE effect in a way. Mm-hmm. So how do you guys kind of enable that to happen?
Yeah, I think honestly, building any connection with a human requires a lot of effort. Building a relationship just takes sheer consistent effort. So like the strongest ones really are like a long-term engagement with an individual. It's not necessarily pulling them into a program, but pulling them even into a DM or into like a smaller working group, and maybe pulling people together who didn't really have a deeper connection beyond being in the same channel and maybe holding the same assets and using the same apps, pulling them into a channel, for example, to spotlight them and say, hey, we recognize you as an active contributor here in our community. We'd really appreciate feedback on this. The conversations that sort of spark out of that between people who weren't necessarily connected previously, I think those things add up over time. So really, I think it's just a consistent effort in making those connections one-on-one and in smaller groups. And again, it's also this element of like not having a single owner. So I sort of resist this community lead role in a lot of ways because I'm one of many. And like, if we think about the other initiatives in our ecosystem, like Sozu House, which is this hacker house / incubator model, Veer or Mark, who's running that, is probably going to cringe when I describe this because he's got such an amazing vision for it. But they really focus on this. They've built this like amazing core group of like high impact builders who go to Sozu House in sometimes like kind of the middle of nowhere to just build amazing things, and the connections that are built there. It's a lot of effort to go, across the world. But what you leave with is a strong bond with a person, and like that's really what we're trying to build.
That's taking stuff from online to IRL, which is difficult. Like we're trying to create as many opportunities for that to happen and empower people from the community to just take initiative and do it on their own. But I feel like once you actually meet someone, like meet me, not necessarily even like obviously like having a call with the camera on or whatever, that's one thing, but meeting him in real life, it's so much different, because then it turns from almost like a prospect into a real human being. And it's very difficult to create those situations. So I applaud you for doing it. So it's really good.
Yeah. Everybody's performing online. You know what I mean? Like to a certain extent, even if we were expressing ourselves, like when you've got a camera pointed at you, there's just something.
You feel the camera, yeah. You are aware of it for sure.
The observer effect, and also like the fact that everything is recorded. Like when you're in a channel, of course you can go back and delete messages, but I think this is also a barrier for people to get involved sometimes, right? Like they're scared to like ask a question which might signal them as somebody who's new or doesn't know something. But in person, like these things expire really quickly, so that becomes an important piece too. And I think there's a lot more grace in IRL, meeting somebody IRL too.
Yeah, for sure. So, kind of reflecting on your career in just community building, what are some of the most valuable lessons that you've learned and you would be kind enough to share today?
Yeah, so another one from Mark, who's our BD lead. He's had a pretty big impact on me as somebody working in the space, building my own career, but also as a community builder. He's somebody that I think everybody can model after as well. But he said one piece of advice, which is just leave it a little unfinished, which
interesting.
I hadn't really considered. But if you leave something a little unfinished, then there's something for somebody to do, right? There's a gap for somebody to fill, and those people can automatically then identify themselves as somebody who wants to engage deeper in that way.
That's really good. That's really good, actually.
Yeah, so good. Because I think also, as people who work behind the scenes and see how everything's working on the community front, we're hyper aware of like all these processes and what needs to happen to make things flow operationally. 100%. It's like you can kind of over engineer things. So
for sure,
thing to keep top of mind.
Interesting. That's a really good lesson. Like I like it. Looking into the future and kind of seeing how things could possibly go in the rest of 2024, then 2025, what future, let's call them trends and developments, do you think will shape kind of the landscape of Web3 communities? Obviously, we kind of discussed the gamification of things as one of them. But do you see anything else as a possible emerging trend?
Yeah, I mean, I think the tools are evolving really quickly lately. There's a group called Safari Club, which I've been following for quite a while, and some of the marketing folks in our ecosystem are involved there. They publish this report on like sort of the marketing tooling infrastructure every so often, and every time they post it, there's like exponentially more projects that are building some way to track conversions, some way to track attribution, some way to onboard and provide value to your users. So I think a lot of that is going to shape the way that this space evolves. The tools in a lot of ways shape the work we do. So in Web2 communities, there's a lot of tools available for folks to build paid communities, and with those come certain limitations, just like Discord, right? Like the onboarding experience that you can get from Discord is not that different for each community you get involved in, because it's defined by the tool. So as tools develop, right, even decentralized social media, right, like these tools where people can own their identity and take it across these different applications, I think that eventually is going to catch up, and I'm guessing there's going to be a transition out of Discord one day. I was just chatting with somebody today, like the management,
hoping.
The management of those spaces can get pretty wild sometimes. So yeah, I think the tools is number one.
Nice. Okay, really cool.
What's your take there? Can I ask questions here?
Yeah, for sure. You can ask questions. I'll be honest, like in terms of, I'm not too good in projecting like and predictions. I think that one thing that I at least hope we will see more is kind of more of a focus on actually facilitating the human connection to a better degree and better enable it, if that makes sense. Because I think that, like, basically, if I'm looking at communities as a product, just like as a simple offering, like let's say Mantle had nothing, just simple community, that's it, just people on Discord. The pain that aims to solve is loneliness. That's kind of what it is. And I think you can only go so far with talking to people online. And I think moving that conversation from online to IRL is something that, like, we need as just like the human race. That's like my feelings. So kind of enabling that, and like I would love to see just like a weekly get together of Game 7 community members like all over the world. Like that would be, for me, it would be like amazing. So that's what I'm hoping we will see, but I don't have any data to to claim this is what's going to happen. So
that's awesome. Focus on people, like not these obscure processes.
Yeah, people, not products, kind of.
For sure.
Yeah,
love that.
So what advice would you be offering to, say, an aspiring community builder? Say we have someone here in the audience joining in, they're building something, him, 3 more of his friends, part-time, trying to do something. He's the community guy. What advice would you give that guy regarding like how to build a community in the Web3 space?
Well, I mean, I'd say, like, if you're thinking about joining a project that already exists, I would say start contributing now. Don't wait. Start meeting people, start talking to people, start trying to provide value based on whatever your skill set is. And if your skill set isn't applicable, try to learn something new and see if that's interesting to you, and then set goals from there, and smaller goals, and just, engage with 10 people and build 10 connections, have one call with a community manager and a community, ask 10 questions to move your career forward. Like, those conversations are really the thing that moved me to the next step, is just connecting with folks and getting their advice. So contribute and ask for advice. Don't be people don't want to gatekeep in this space. I think most people don't. They want to share knowledge, and
100%.
I think, like, this, one of the major learnings I've had from being in this space is that every single community, whether it's in Web3 or elsewhere, every single community is a learning community. So be ready to learn and be ready to share knowledge. And
that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So I'll kind of, that will be my last question. So if you were to do it all over again, what would you do?
All over again. Okay, so I'll take all over again as in this sort of journey I've had with Mantle, because this is the most relevant, I guess, for my career over the last couple of years. One is, I would say, like, quick growth is great, and that comes, partially from internal expectations from the team and from the community. We want to grow quickly as a new protocol and as a new chain. But personally, I'd put a stronger focus on onboarding and retention to keep those folks, because there can be a lot of churn, right? The narrative switch and people move over. The other thing is don't over leverage on narratives. Tools change, like we said before. Just be ready to shift, and again, focus on people, not processes. And then, I think those would probably be the two main focuses.
That's good. Okay, this was great. I think this episode is kind of packed with a lot of advice, a lot of resources, also some very interesting takes. I think we dove deep into some interesting ideas, and I really want to thank you for being here and taking the time and taking the opportunity and kind of sharing all of your expertise and all of your journey. This is greatly appreciated by myself first and foremost, but I believe by everyone that's tuning in, both of our communities, hopefully. So I really want to thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. This is a great opportunity and a great chance to connect with an early Mantle / BitDAO community, the Game 7 community. So
exactly.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it.
Nice. Okay, so I would like to kind of encourage everyone to connect with Brian over social media. I believe your Twitter is DAO_lBrian.
Yes, I believe so.
Perfect. So go follow him. He has a lot of interesting ideas, and hopefully we will do probably a round two in the future after we will have some interesting developments in both of our communities and more to talk to. And I want to encourage you to actually check out the quests that are currently live from the Mantle Network in the Game 7 portal. It's app.game7.io. Go check it out, do some quests, gain some EXP. It's super fun, super easy, and you get to learn a lot about the space. As always, your support is extremely important in bringing in even more incredible guests to the show by subscribing, following, sharing. You help us to keep attract more interesting experts just like Brian. So if you help this show by subscribing, I can only promise that everything about the show will only get better and better and better and better. I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thank you very much.